Penguin Random House Audio presents The Captain, a memoir by David Wright and Anthony Dicomo. Read for you by Joe Knezevich. Introduction. I thought I was going to throw up. By age 35, I figured I had experienced most everything one could on a baseball diamond. I was a first-round draft pick who had been to a World Series and 7 All-Star games. I had twice represented my country at the World Baseball Classic, wearing the letters USA across my chest. I'd swung my bat thousands of times for the team I'd grown up loving. I'd stared down the greatest closer who ever lived on one of the game's most pressure-packed stages. But until this day, I had never felt the emotion of standing in uniform, knowing I was wearing it for the final time. 7 years earlier, I'd fractured my back on a hustle play at third base, beginning a health spiral that would ultimately end my career. In 2015, doctors diagnosed me with stenosis, a degenerative narrowing of the spinal canal. Twice a day that summer, I ground through the monotony of physical therapy, trying to will my body to cooperate. It worked, at least temporarily. I made it to the World Series for the first time that autumn, even hitting a go-ahead home run early in Game 3. But the injuries never ceased. The next year, my neck required surgery, then my shoulder, then my back. Late in 2018, I finally admitted to myself that I would never truly return to the field on my terms. So the Mets and I hatched a plan. I would suit up for 2 final games before calling it a career. That is how I found myself in the on-deck circle at Citi Field in New York City, bent in a crouch, trying to prepare for my first at-bat in 28 months. I remembered being nervous for my big league debut and the World Series, and for dozens of moments in between. But I had never felt like this. Physically sick, unsure if I could stand up and make the short walk to home plate. My legs wobbled as a sold-out crowd chanted my name. I took a couple of practice cuts, and then the inning ended with me stranded on deck. Back to the dugout I retreated, hoping to regain my composure. From the time I was young, baseball meant everything to me. My father helped introduce me to the game in our backyard, installing a homemade tee made out of concrete, a PVC pipe, and a little bit of rubber, and hanging a fishnet between 2 trees so I could hit balls into it. Growing up, I attended minor league games in my coastal Virginia hometown, then watched on television as those players broke into the majors. I wanted badly to become one of them, and eventually I succeeded, playing for the only team I'd ever rooted for as a kid. Maybe from the outside it seems like things came easy to me. They didn't. As much as I tried to do everything the right way, my career wasn't about skating by without adversity. It was about refusing to let pain define me. It was about the value of hard work, of perseverance, of living life in a manner that leaves no room for regrets. As the years passed, my body failed me, making it impossible to go out on my terms, but at least I could dictate a small part of my ending. After another half inning passed that night at Citi, I grabbed a bat and walked back onto the field, steeled a bit better this time to keep the crowd from frazzling my nerves. I made my way back into the on-deck circle, looped my bat in an arc around each shoulder, then dropped into a squat to survey the field. The sight of some of my greatest triumphs as a baseball player, and also some of my most jarring failures. Then I stood back up and strode to the plate. 1. The pudgy kid at shortstop. To this day, my father isn't sure quite what possessed him. Shortly after I was born, once the initial bursts of elation and exhaustion and emotion had faded, my dad, Ron, had a chance to steal away from the hospital for a few hours. Intending to drive straight home for a bit of rest, he instead found himself pulling into the parking lot of a local department store. This was a few days before Christmas, and as he puts it, the shelves were mostly bare, but there was my dad, rummaging around them long enough to find a plastic glove, a kid-sized Louisville Slugger, and a cheap baseball. Ron Wright was never much of an athlete, too short for basketball and too small for football, But he did play baseball and enjoy the game. He wanted to instill that same love in me. In the weeks that followed, my grandmother constructed a wooden plaque with prongs sticking out of it to hold the bat, as well as spots to store the glove and ball. That contraption hung on my bedroom wall from the first days of my life until I was old enough to go play outside with them. They were perfect. At first I could barely lift the bat, but I never got tired of trying alongside my father and grandfather in the backyard. When I got older, my dad told me to swing it underwater because he had read that was how Greg Jeffries trained. I was probably better equipped to handle a wiffle ball bat, which I often did, standing with my back to my grandfather's pool and trying to hit his looping pitches for hours. To say I was predisposed to a love of baseball would probably be an understatement. From the time that I could walk, everything on both sides of my family revolved around a ball and a bat. So enthused was I about the game that one afternoon, when my mother, Elisa, spied a Little League team playing, she stopped the car, got out, and asked someone at the field how old I had to be to register. Turned out I was a year too young, but the next spring, I was out there in uniform, ready to make my Green Run Little League debut. I showed up with the same wooden bat my dad had bought on his way home from the hospital, which embarrassed him only a little when he realized all the other kids were swinging aluminum. We learned that sort of stuff on the fly. Quickly, Saturday turned into the best day of the week. I would wake up and spend all day at the field. I would eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the concession stand, watch the other games, and play in mine, loving every second of it. 3 younger brothers, Stephen, Matthew, and Daniel, eventually came along, 1 every 3 years. We all played baseball. None of us could get enough. What's amazing to me now, looking back, is how much my parents sacrificed to help make that possible. My dad was raised in the Hampton Roads region of Virginia, which in those days was generally just referred to as Tidewater. It encompasses Norfolk, the biggest city in the area, Virginia Beach, where I grew up, Chesapeake, where we moved when I was a teenager, and several other communities. Dad met Mom at a local roller skating rink, convinced her to go on a double date with 2 other friends, and managed to turn that one date into many more. Ron and Elisa became high school sweethearts. In 1978, when she was 19 and he was only 18, they got married. At the time, my mom was working at the local Navy Exchange store, while my dad was earning some cash at an auto dealership with his uncle, selling muscle cars, which were all the rage. Within a couple of years, they switched. She started working at the dealership, doing bookkeeping and other tasks, while he worked security at the Navy Exchange, rooting out shoplifters. That sparked Ron's interest in law enforcement, and once he was eligible at age 21, he applied to the police academies in Norfolk and Virginia Beach. Norfolk, a much more urban area with some relatively high crime rates, called him back first. A career was born. Until I grew older, I wasn't really aware of the dangerous nature of my father's work. Flipping through channels as a kid, I watched Cops and saw the officers busting down doors and catching bad guys, but my brothers and I always thought there was no way my dad did that sort of stuff. When we all sat together for family dinners, my father never talked about his work. My parents completely shielded us from it, even if that wasn't totally on purpose. To Ron, the work didn't always seem all that dangerous. To me and my brothers, it was just what he did. Our biggest thrill was having him flip on the siren for us as we drove around town in an unmarked police car. Sometimes we'd get to wear screen-printed T-shirts that the officers made to celebrate successful missions, even though we didn't really know everything that went into them. It wasn't until I was an adult that I learned the truth from a couple of his partners at a local gym. "Your dad was a bad dude," one of them told me. "Him?" I replied, incredulous. "Him." I had always pictured Ron with his feet up at the local precinct, donut in hand, pushing paper from behind his desk. But when his friends started opening my eyes with stories of his time on the beat, I learned that he actually was that guy in Cops, breaking down doors and catching bad guys. Ron started out on precinct patrol, wearing a uniform, driving his cop car around town. Eventually, he worked his way into the K-9 unit, which doubled as the Norfolk Police Department's SWAT team. If the situation...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?